This is going to be a fun one because I'm going to have some fun with this one. We didn't have a guest on this show, so I was like, you know what? Let's give the people what they want. We're not just going to do one predict to commit, right? We gotta add some layers and some elements to this. So we're going to have some fun with this one. We're going to actually pick 2 predict to commits. And so let me do a quick refresher because there have been some scoreboard changes, I would say, since the last time that we've done one of these. So Jordan, on your list of predicted commits, you have running back Derek Cooper, linebacker Tyler Atkinson, defensive lineman Carter Lucky, tight end Mark Bowman, defensive back Jordan Smith. And I will say, last time we were recording this, I got a text message in the middle of us talking about predicted commit, and I said, Jordan, there's someone on your team that I just got a text about that I think you should feel really good about that ending up. I will let the people know now. I gave that tease then. That was about Jordan Smith. So congratulations to you finally getting on the board. You got on the board with more than just Jordan Smith. He wasn't even your first on the board, but he was your first prediction that you made that has resulted in a win. So congratulations there. Offensive lineman Jared Smith, who, again, I like where you're at there. Outside linebacker Kamari Brooks, I like where you're at there. Quarterback Jared Curtis. That was probably the savviest move you made because now I can't pick a quarterback. Like, I'm just not going to have a quarterback on my team at any point. So excellent move by you there. Defensive lineman PJ Dean, wide receiver Craig Dandridge, and then last episode, defensive lineman James Johnson. Do you have anything to say for your correct predictions?
We're just getting started over here at Team Jordan.
That's right. Job's not finished. All right. And then on my team, I have Graham Houston, Zach Fort. Those were my first 2. So I am going to, as bad as things could get for me the rest of the summer, I'm just always going to say when we started this exercise, my first 2, I absolutely nailed them, and I felt good about them from start to finish. Also have Jay Lamar, running back Jay Lamar, offensive lineman Malcolm Gaston, defensive back Tyreek Green, offensive lineman Jackson Cantwell. So that is the first misfire from either side so far. So you've got 2 correct. I've got 2 correct. I've got 1 incorrect. I think that you're sitting pretty leaving this episode today, Jordan. Wide receiver Ryan Mosley, offensive lineman Ekene Boko, offensive lineman Brett Koleje, defensive lineman Ernest Rankins, and then defensive back Peyton Dyer, who I picked last episode. We're going to pick 2 apiece. We're going to do snake style. Do you want to go 1 and 4, or do you want to go 2 and 3? I'll let you make that pick.
I think I want to go 1 and 4.
All right.
And see sort of how the board plays out.
All right, let's see it. Hit me with your number 1.
So we're getting at the point with these where there's not the slam dunks like Ben said earlier. With his first picks, it was guys that, as Ben's the recruiting reporter, he felt pretty good about, and they both panned out. And some of my early picks, I was like, okay, I like these. Now we're kind of getting to the point where maybe it's a stretch, and they're definitely not slam dunk sure things. But this was a guy when we were going over. When I was reading through before this episode, I was like, neither one of us have picked this guy. So I'm going to take him off the board, and I'm going to go Caden Prothrow. I'm going to pick Caden for my class. I'm a little bit hesitant because I've already got Mark Bowman, but you've done a great job of reporting on his recruitment and saying, look, Georgia doesn't necessarily just look at him as a tight end. They look at him as an offensive weapon. Being able to line him out wide, also involve him at tight end. And the thing, too, that I look at with Caden Prothrow, 6'6", 210 out of Bowden, Georgia, that Georgia does such a effective job of being able to recruit tight end. Because I look at tight end and inside linebacker every single year, and I go, well, they can't possibly sign multiple guys at this, but look what they just signed in 2025. But they do it over and over. And this is one that I'm not sitting here thinking, oh, it's just a matter of time before he commits. But just knowing Todd Hartley, knowing how they recruit the position, and knowing, they've got Mark Bowman, they've already got Lincoln Keys, I still see a world where they can make Caden Prothrow happen, give him very creative ways to be involved in the Georgia offense. It won't be easy, but I'm throwing Caden Prothrow on my team.
I think it's a great pick for a few reasons. One, there is a world where Georgia's only able to sign Mark Bowman or Caden Prothro, not Mark Bowman and Caden Prothro. But I think sitting right here, right now, it's a pretty safe bet that they get at least one of those two guys. And so I think it's a good security blanket for your Bowman pick. I think also you've sort of squeezed me out of predicting a tight end now at this point because we've had Lincoln Keys on the show before. Georgia loves that dude. I think that he is going to rise up rankings as it gets further into the year as well. Georgia, really wants to hold on to him. They obviously are going to go all in for Mark Bowman. And if they were to take three, I mean, those would be the three: Keys, Prothro, and Bowman. So again, I can't really make a tight end pick. I think that, Matt Ludwig is a tight end that Georgia likes a lot that's going to take an official visit this summer. I don't love Georgia's chances of getting him at this point, but, I guess maybe there's a chance that we're doing like a June 5th episode or a June 10th episode, and I'm picking Matt Ludwig to maybe try and okie dokie at tight end. But I think that that's a super savvy pick, and he just has a lot of UGA traits that make a lot of sense, right? Like, he's won 3 state championships. He is a freakish athlete. He plays baseball. He plays basketball. He plays football. I think Georgia's thinking almost as an offensive weapon more so than a tight end. And so for that, I think even if Georgia does get Mark Bowman and does get Lincoln Keys, there's still a world where they could add Caden Prothro and you'd be able to land on both Bowman and Prothro. All right. I like that you gave me 2-3 because I wasn't going to take Caden, even though, again, you've done a great job this whole year I point to Jordan Smith, Jared Smith, especially now. Kamari Brooks is definitely one where I didn't necessarily have them on my list that day. And I'm like, I thought you do this, Ben. Like, I thought you were a recruiting guy. What are you doing? And when you brought him up, I've said, man, that was a really good pick. And so Caden's definitely another one of those. I'm going to talk about a guy that has come up to me more recently that I think, we've known Georgia was in it, but I think I'm starting to understand how much Georgia values him as a prospect. And it's a name that everybody is familiar with. And it is the younger brother of Minkah Fitzpatrick, Justice Fitzpatrick. He's going to take an official visit to Georgia at the beginning of June. Interestingly, I know people are maybe a little bit war-torn after the Jackson Cantwell recruitment, but it's one that I think will come down to Georgia and Miami. And the reason that I think that is because go look at Minkah Fitzpatrick's recruitment and who was involved in that recruitment on the staff at Alabama when Minkah Fitzpatrick committed to Alabama. It was Kirby Smart and it was Mario Cristobal. You go look at Minkah Fitzpatrick's profile to this day, the primary and secondary recruiters on his profile page are Mario Cristobal and Kirby Smart. And so I think this is poised to be a Kirby Smart versus Mario Cristobal recruitment because of those relationships. I know everybody listening to this is going to say, oh, well, if Miami wants to throw him a bag, there's nothing that Georgia can do. Look, if people are operating under this house settlement salary cap world the way they think we think that they are, there's only so many bags to go around. You can't throw a bag at everybody. I think Georgia is going to value this guy highly, and this is a cornerback that I have now, when Georgia lost out on Jontavius Wyman and he flipped to Miami, the feedback that I got was, I think, Georgia could be potentially in a better place in the future because of it. I think they're in position for some elite guys that they could potentially land. I think Justice Fitzpatrick is a name that I have not written about nearly enough this cycle. And I don't want to fully tease my mock class, but why not? I might as well tease my mock class. I'm putting him in a predict to commit. Actually, in fact, let me say this. If you're listening to this now, you've maybe already read my mock class. But if you haven't already read my mock class, go read my mock class. And you'll also see that Justice Fitzpatrick, spoiler alert, is going to be in that.
What a tease. And yeah, cornerback is now, with what they've added at safety, just very fascinating to see where Georgia goes. And look, I know better than to put a lot of stock in this, but it seems like if there was a guy who doesn't necessarily have to get a bag to go pick a college, it'd probably be Minka Fitzpatrick's little brother. But I mean, maybe that's reading too much into it. But I like the pick.
No, I think you're probably right about that. All right, and then with my second pick, I'm going to put you to the test in terms of spelling, because this is a heck of a spelling of, and I might be butchering the first name, so I apologize. I'm actually getting out to see this guy next week, but it's someone that have when I was making my spring schedule of what high schools am I going to be hitting to this spring, it was, I wanted to sort of cross check with some intel, like, where should I be going? Where should I not be going? What do I need to add? What do I need to remove? And this guy's name came up as someone where I absolutely needed to go out to see him. And that alone was an alarm bell that went off for me of, oh, Georgia's way more in it with this guy than I realized. And his name is Whitley Caddo, Wihtelley. It's very possible that it's not Whitley. It could be Whitelli. I'll confirm that with him, and I'll get that situated after, when I meet him next week. This is a guy that has developed his body over the last 6 months. And I think that because of that, when Georgia got out to schools in the spring, Georgia, or in the winter, I guess, Georgia's going by all these various schools, and sometimes they go by a school and you're like, I don't even know that is there a major recruit that's up at that school? I'm not that familiar with them. The reason Georgia wants to get there is because a guy like this might be listed at 6'2", 270, and then they get to the school and it's like, oh wait, no, this guy's 6'5", 295, and I'm looking at his arms and he's going to be able to build on that frame. And I think that's what happened here in this recruitment. I think that Georgia got out to see him. They realized, oh, there is a dude that looks like a Georgia defensive lineman right there in Atlanta, and Georgia's going to turn up the heat on him. Now, I want to issue a caveat. I do not think that this is a lock for him to end up at Georgia. This is not I've got, like, when I picked Graham Houston, I'll just say it, like, I knew Georgia was going to get Graham Houston, and I knew it was only a matter of time, and I was, sort of plugging that ahead of time so I could pat myself on the back in the future. This is not one of those selections. I think Georgia's way more interested here than I realized. And because of that, I've been trying to piece together, who is Georgia going to add on the defensive line? You got to figure out certain guys that you're going to be able to add on a budget. And I think that this is a guy that fits in to that category just because of what his recruiting profile has been, and because he hasn't blown up getting a bunch of offers from other places. But Whitley Caddo is someone that I am putting my stamp on that I think is Georgia material.
I don't know if you feel this way, Ben, but like a recruit like him, one, I'll be honest, I don't really know a ton about him, but I always kind of pull for the guys who kind of seem like they come out of nowhere as far as landing on like a Georgia radar, like Dennis last year.
Yep.
Just seeing a guy that, you always kind of think, at least in the time I've followed along with recruiting, it's like your junior years when things really start to pick up. And it's like kind of by your senior year, like the clock's ticking on if you're going to get some major offers. So I'm always going to be rooting for those kind of kids that it might be a little bit later, but that doesn't necessarily say anything about the player they could be. And, maybe they can get there and make a lot of noise.
And I'll say this too. We talk a lot about salary cap and the new revenue share world that we're operating in. Kip Adams actually made this comment to me, like, are we going to get into a world where coaches no longer want their recruits to be highly rated? They want them to be lower rated, sort of diamond in the rough types, so that their price tag doesn't get driven up because they become mega recruits with mega agents. Like, if you want to avoid that, you almost want these hidden recruitments out there. And, I've had it brought up more than just with Caddo. I've had it brought up with some other players around the state that we've talked about. Terrius Favors was one, Dallas Dickerson over at North Oconee, who Georgia hasn't offered yet. But like, there are certain guys that I think, and this doesn't just happen in Georgia. Like, I'm sure Alabama and Auburn do the same thing with guys from the state of Alabama. You figure out who your hidden gems are, and you try and keep them hidden from everybody else, because it becomes, easier for you to compile or put together a roster when you have guys like this. And so I definitely think this is an example of someone too, where when you see him, and if you just eliminate stars and you eliminate what you know about everything about every recruit, and you just see the player and you see the prospect and the wingspan and the dimensions and everything, you're like, oh, that guy seems like a Georgia guy. And I think that's kind of what happened there. All right, who's your last one, Jordan?
Ben, I think you had to know when you made this move a few episodes ago that it would come back, and that I would have to circle back. But I have to go with a guy that you dropped.
Yeah.
I'm picking up Desmond Green, interior offensive lineman. I just think we're in a very interesting spot. I think specifically when you look at Desmond Green and you look at Malcolm Gadsden, what's going to happen there? Who winds up at Georgia? To me, it just sort of feels like it's one or the other. So it's sort of hedging my bets. It seems like Clemson and South Carolina, I think, have been recruiting Desmond Green really hard. But yeah, it's kind of like a game of chicken between me and you now. I think we're getting one of those two guys as an interior offensive lineman. And again, I mean, as soon as you dropped him, it's like, okay, it's probably a matter of time. I'm going to have to make Ben pay for this one.
Yeah, Big Dez. I think it's a good pick. I know he was interacting and engaging with many of the Jared Curtis news items that we were posting from the Dogs 24/7 account and my personal account as well. So he is clearly paying attention to things that are happening in the Georgia recruiting world. Someone that's been in my mock classes in the past. I like the pick. I'll say this too in the Gaston and Green conversation, but also just other position groups too. Georgia's going to have its first elite summer camp on June 1st. And I think that for guys that Georgia's maybe still trying to figure things out with, or roster spots are getting tight, or they're trying to distinguish, all right, hey, there's 6 guys that we really like for 3 spots. How are we going to differentiate between them? I think that July 1st summer camp is a great opportunity, or not July 1st, I apologize. June 1st summer camp is a great opportunity for those guys to prove to the Georgia staff one final time against some other elite competition that, hey, I'm a great fit to be at Georgia. I'm interested to see how it plays out with certain other interior offensive linemen because, with the Cantwell news happening, a lot of the focus is going to be at tackle, but you talk about the interior offensive line, Cantwell, Gaston, Desmond Green, Brett Collegier, Graham Houston, Zakai Helton, Ekene Boko is a guy that could play on the interior. Some other guys that we might still talk about here on this episode potentially could play on the interior. And so because of that, I'm as fascinated by interior offensive line recruiting for the rest of this cycle in terms of how it shakes out as I am who Georgia pivots to at tackle, which will be very important too, but I think that'll be a little bit more cut and dry.